Have you ever caught yourself living a moment and, at the same time, watching yourself live it? You laugh, yet something in you examines the laughter. You love someone, yet already sense the architecture of their absence. You achieve what you wanted and discover, almost offensively, that desire has survived its own fulfillment. What happens when consciousness becomes too difficult to escape? Perhaps there is a point beyond which understanding stops feeling like light. Not because truth is inherently cruel, but because certain realizations cannot be returned once acquired. A mind can abandon an idea. It cannot always recover the innocence that existed before the idea, and that changes everything. You begin to notice that hunger returns after every meal. That possession merely changes the shape of wanting. That every face you love is temporary. That civilizations build monuments against time, although time has never negotiated with stone. Still, we continue. Is that courage? Instinct? Denial? Or is consciousness itself trapped inside a contradiction? Intelligent enough to recognize the machinery of existence, yet imprisoned within the machinery it recognizes? Perhaps happiness requires more than having something. Perhaps it requires temporarily forgetting what having means. That what can be possessed can be lost. What begins is already moving toward its ending, and every forever is spoken by a mortal mouth. So consider a more disturbing possibility. What if some suffering does not come from misunderstanding life, but from understanding certain parts of it too clearly? What if the mind can become perceptive enough to dissolve the explanations that once protected it, while remaining unable to live without explanations? Then the real question is no longer why some people think so much. It is this: how much of human happiness depends on never looking too closely at what we are? Because once consciousness begins observing itself, something irreversible may have already happened. You are no longer merely living. You know that you are. There is a peculiar cruelty in being able to question the very thing that is hurting you. Pain itself is simple. A wounded animal suffers without demanding that suffering justify its existence. A human being can suffer. Recognize the suffering, investigate its origin, imagine its continuation, remember its predecessors, and finally ask a question for which reality may provide no satisfying answer. Why must there be a creature capable of experiencing this at all? This is where thought acquires a darker function. Consciousness does not merely receive experience. It can turn around and examine the one experiencing it. And once that movement becomes habitual, even sincerity becomes difficult to trust. Why did you help that person? Compassion. Or did being compassionate allow you to preserve a flattering image of yourself? Why do you miss someone? Because you love them? Or because their absence injured your need to be loved? Even morality can become contaminated by examination. You perform a generous act, then notice the pleasure of considering yourself generous. Suddenly, something beautiful has acquired fingerprints. The tragedy is not that every noble motive is secretly corrupt. That would be false. The tragedy is that sufficiently relentless introspection can make certainty about your own motives almost impossible. How do you surrender to an emotion while simultaneously dissecting it? Consider grief. A man stands beside his mother's coffin. His hands tremble. Her face is familiar and impossibly unreachable. Then, amid genuine devastation, he notices himself crying. For 1 second, there are two of him. The son who has lost his mother, and the observer studying the son who has lost his mother. Immediately, shame may enter. Are these tears genuine? Why am I noticing myself? What kind of person analyzes grief while grieving? Yet the observation does not make his love false. It reveals something more disturbing. Consciousness can enter rooms inside us where it was never invited. Eventually, the question becomes even stranger. Who is observing whom? Search for the self, and you encounter memories, impulses, fears, habits, inherited language, bodily sensations, unfinished desires. Remove them one by one in thought. And where exactly is the owner? We speak of my mind as though someone were standing behind thought, holding its deed of ownership. Yet when we search for that someone, we find another thought searching. Perhaps this is why extreme self-awareness can feel less like possessing a brighter lamp and more like living in a house where every wall has gradually become a mirror. Nothing necessarily becomes clearer. There are simply more angles from which to doubt what you see. And here, intelligence encounters its first punishment. Not sadness, not loneliness. Suspicion toward one's own inner life. The spontaneous person acts and later reflects. The excessively conscious person may reflect until the moment for action has already died. There are doors that disappear while we are still calculating whether entering them would have been authentic. And perhaps that is the first irreversible loss. Once you have learned to stand outside yourself and watch the machinery move, returning completely to innocence becomes difficult. Yet something worse follows, because sooner or later, the mind that learned to dissect itself develops the courage to apply the same instrument to everything else. And the world, under examination, may prove even harder to survive than the self. What if getting what you want is not the opposite of wanting, but merely its brief interruption? Look carefully at desire. Before possession, there is absence. Something is missing, and the mind gives that absence a name. Money, recognition, intimacy, achievement, a particular person, a different life. Then comes pursuit. Years can be organized around it. And finally, sometimes, the desired thing arrives. For a while, the internal argument stops. Then something almost insulting happens. Ordinary life returns. The promotion becomes your job. The new house becomes the place where you leave dirty dishes. The person whose message once altered your heartbeat becomes someone beside whom you discuss electricity bills. The object that occupied months of imagination eventually becomes another object requiring dusting. None of this makes love, ambition, family, or achievement meaningless. It reveals something stranger about desire itself. Fulfillment changes our circumstances more reliably than it changes our capacity to feel incomplete. And what happens when a mind notices that pattern? Imagine a man at 65. At 25, he promised himself that exhaustion was temporary. He would sacrifice now and live later. So he worked. He missed ordinary Tuesdays with his children. His father's voice grew weaker across increasingly infrequent phone calls. His marriage became efficient. His body began sending invoices for decades of neglect. Eventually, he succeeds. There is money in the account. His name carries weight. The house is paid for. One morning, he sits in the kitchen he once imagined owning and realizes that the future he spent 40 years approaching has become the present. And he does not know what to do with it. His children have lives elsewhere. His father is dead. His youth exists only in photographs whose faces still believe they have unlimited time. Was his life wasted? Not necessarily. That is precisely what makes the question unbearable. He may have lived responsibly, loved genuinely, accomplished difficult things, and still discover that no achievement possesses the power he secretly assigned to it. Because perhaps we rarely desire only the thing. We desire what we imagine the thing will finally make us feel. Complete, secure, enough. Yet enough is a peculiar destination. Human beings repeatedly arrive there and discover that someone has moved the border. So the reflective mind begins noticing the machinery beneath aspiration. We suffer while reaching. We celebrate upon arriving. We adapt. Then we reach again. A person can spend decades changing the object without recognizing the permanence of the verb. wanting. This is where pessimism becomes more serious than sadness. It does not claim that pleasure is unreal. Pleasure is real. Love is real. Achievement matters to human beings. The darker possibility is simply that reality never promised these things would culminate in permanent completion. Perhaps existence owes us no final satisfaction, no emotional settlement, no moment in which life signs a document declaring, "You have acquired enough. You may now stop longing." And once someone sees this, another question becomes unavoidable. If every finite desire eventually reveals another horizon behind it, what are we actually searching for through all these objects? Perhaps this is why human beings eventually invent a more dangerous hunger. When pleasure fails to become an answer, we begin asking for something pleasure was never designed to provide. Not another possession, not another victory, meaning. And that is where the problem stops being personal. Because now, we must ask whether reality contains an answer at all. What if reality is not hiding an answer from us? What if it was never written as a question? A child dies before learning why people die. A mother begs beside a hospital bed until language becomes useless. Somewhere else, a missile reaches an apartment where a family had left breakfast plates on the table. And tonight, the constellations will occupy nearly the same positions. That is not cruelty. Cruelty requires intention. Indifference is more difficult to accuse. We are creatures who instinctively ask why in a universe that often gives us only what happened. Why him? Why now? Why suffering? Why should consciousness exist briefly, become attached to other consciousnesses, and then be forced to lose them? Science can often explain mechanisms with extraordinary precision. It can tell us how stars collapse, how cells mutate, how bodies fail. Yet mechanism and meaning are different currencies. Knowing how someone died does not tell the grieving mother why her love had to become memory. Here, nihilism enters through a narrow door, not as the childish claim that nothing matters, but as a more frightening possibility. Perhaps meaning matters enormously to us while having no guaranteed existence outside us. Look at the scale. Earth is not the center of the cosmos. Our species arrived extraordinarily late in cosmic history. Every empire that called itself eternal eventually became material for historians. And still, we love as though love were written into the structure of reality. We bury our dead with names. We preserve photographs. We say, "I will remember you." Why? Perhaps because memory is the small rebellion available to beings who cannot negotiate with disappearance. Yet the deeper mind encounters a brutal asymmetry. It can question the foundations beneath its inherited answers faster than it can build foundations capable of replacing them. And once heaven, destiny, progress, legacy, even the self become questions, rather than guarantees, where does thought stand? Maybe nowhere. Perhaps that is the true vertigo. Not discovering that life has no meaning. Discovering that reality may never settle the question for us. And if the universe refuses to answer, there remains one final place to investigate. The consciousness demanding an answer. There is a question more disturbing than death. Why is there anything here to die? Strip reality of every inherited explanation. Remove purpose. Remove destiny. Remove the comforting assumption that existence must ultimately make sense to the creature examining it. Something remains. Existence itself. And suddenly, the ordinary becomes almost unbearable. A hand resting on a table. A thought appearing without permission. The strange fact that you are not merely matter, at least from your own perspective, but matter to which something is happening from the inside. Why? We can trace neural activity. We can study perception, memory, attention, and the brain states associated with conscious experience. Yet explaining these mechanisms does not by itself dissolve the philosophical mystery of why experience exists at all. Then comes the more intimate fracture. What exactly is the I experiencing it? Look inward. You find memories, sensations, language, impulses, images. Yet where is the owner apart from these contents? Try to catch the thinker before the next thought appears. Something peculiar happens. The observer becomes another thing observed. Here, nihilism and mysticism approach the same border from opposite directions. One suspects there is nothing behind the curtain. The other suspects the curtain is a limitation of human perception. Neither suspicion becomes certainty merely because it feels profound. And perhaps intellectual maturity begins precisely there, refusing to manufacture knowledge where knowledge ends. Because reason possesses an extraordinary ability to dismantle false certainty. Yet reason cannot honestly turn every unknown into emptiness. Not knowing is not proof of nothingness. So the deepest mind can become stranded between two temptations: believing because uncertainty hurts, or denying because mystery humiliates reason. What remains between them? A terrifying possibility. Perhaps reality is not meaningless. Perhaps it is not meaningful. Perhaps those are human categories being pressed against something older than both. And for the person who can no longer believe innocently, yet cannot honestly declare the mystery solved, there is no comfortable shore. Only the unbearable recognition that existence is happening, before we have understood what existence is. What do you do when the truth does not save you? There is no honest promise that suffering makes us wiser. Some people emerge from tragedy transformed. Others emerge diminished. Some never emerge at all. Pain is not a teacher under contract. It owes us no lesson. So perhaps the final question is not how to defeat suffering, nor how to force existence into meaning. It is more severe. How do you continue when you can no longer believe the things that once made continuing easier? Some create purpose. Some surrender to faith. Some reduce desire. Some accept absurdity. Others never resolve the question and simply carry it, as one carries an old injury that has entered the body's vocabulary. None possesses a verdict certified by the universe. Perhaps lucidity begins when we stop demanding one. Because the deepest suffering of the reflective mind may not come from thinking more. It may come from discovering that intelligence is excellent at removing false foundations and remarkably poor at telling us what deserves to be built afterward. It can expose vanity inside ambition, impermanence inside possession, contradiction inside morality, uncertainty inside identity. And eventually, the mind may stand before existence with almost nothing left to hide behind. Yet morning still arrives. You wash a cup. Someone you love says your name from another room. For several seconds, sunlight occupies a wall that will one day belong to strangers. You know none of this will remain. And still, something in you answers it. Perhaps that response requires no cosmic justification. Perhaps loving what disappears is not irrational, because it disappears. Perhaps its disappearance is precisely what makes attention morally urgent. So intelligence may carry a peculiar burden, seeing that no final explanation is guaranteed, while still having to choose how to live before certainty arrives. And perhaps it never will. The last paradox is therefore not that we continue because we discovered the meaning of existence. It is stranger than that. We may understand that existence owes us no answer, see clearly how temporary everything is, and still find ourselves capable of tenderness, not because the abyss disappeared, because for one impossible moment, we stopped asking it for permission to live. If these ideas make you question what others simply accept, you already belong here. And just by watching, sharing, and returning, you're helping this channel more than you realize. If you want to go deeper, membership includes 100+ exclusive videos, and there's currently a 1-month free trial available. You can also use super thanks to directly support the work behind these essays. No pressure. Your attention already matters. But if this channel gives you something worth keeping, becoming a member is one way of helping it continue.